Good morning. Good morning. I'm Lois Brooks. I'm a University Chief Information Officer. What I have just learned is that these podiums are not designed for people under a certain height. So to reach the mic, I'm just coming around. Good morning. Thank you all for coming out. What we're doing today, I think, is unique to the university. It's something we haven't done before, which is to solve an incredibly complex IT problem, systemically end-to-end, fully engaging the community, fully solving for what you're trying to accomplish in your jobs and doing it together. I don't think we've ever undertaken anything this complex and this engaged with the community with a deep commitment to doing it once and doing it right. What we are solving for is interoperability, data management, and ID management, the entire set of underpinnings, interoperability underpinnings that underlie every project. So I think many of you have participated in the design work that's been going on since, January, February. Some months now, really excellent high-quality design to get us to this point. Today is the day we launch the project. We are going, and we will have new infrastructure stood up and ready to go next year. Out of scope for the project is figuring out what we do with all the stuff we already own. We'll get there over time. The first step is to lay in best-in-class, industry-standard identity interoperability, data management infrastructure, and do every project going forward in the right way. That's where we're heading. We cannot do this without the full engagement of the community, because we won't be solving for the right business problems, and we won't be sure that we solve them unless you're all here with us helping solve together. So today is the kickoff, but is by no means the last time you're in the room with the project team. Thank you for the time. Thank you for bringing your best to make sure the university has best-in-class infrastructure going forward. We really appreciate it, and we can't do it without you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
All right. So just a few words about what we've got in store today. Today, as Lois mentioned, is really just about putting that stake in the sand. A lot of you have heard a lot about this initiative. In fact, I've joked with a few people. We've done such a good job of making folks aware that many people have made some conclusions about or some assumptions about us being much further along in this initiative than we actually are. So really, today actually marks, with the new fiscal year, the actual rubber hitting the road, if you will, on the project. So we want to talk a little bit about, as Lois mentioned, a key component of the initiative is actually going to be engagement. We can't do this without everyone's involvement. So we really want to talk about setting the stage here today about how we work with everyone in the community. So we really want to get folks started talking to each other. We're going to do some introductions and actually a little table exercise to get y'all talking about what interop means to you, understanding who your peers within this effort will be, what other people's interests are, and so forth, and kind of to set the stage for now's the time to start working actively with us. So again, just to kind of set the stage for what our purpose here today is just kind of help you to reinforce what the vision and the approach for the project will be, and how to start building that successful partnership. There are a lot of folks, various perspectives in the room here today. We actually have the entire technical team that will be working on the project, but we've also invited all of the folks that participated with the discovery effort today, and then we asked for some contributions. Who else should we include? So we know this is not an exhaustive list. There are a number of other folks that will need to or want to be involved, but we're trying to start taking that step forward and putting that that primer out there to start engaging with us. So this is just a short list of non-exhaustive list of the folks that we've had with us. So really want to just get y'all started. So at your tables, if you could just introduce yourself, talk about, let folks know where you're from, and then what does interoperability mean to you? So I'll turn it off to the audience. All right, so quickly, I just wanted to introduce myself. I probably know everyone in the room, but my name's Joe Charter. I'm the Interim Director for Application Infrastructure Services. Most of the technical teams involved with this initiative will be out of the department I currently oversee, so I'm the initiative sponsor. A couple folks that will not have speaking roles today that you should probably at least be aware of faces for. I want to introduce you to on the program management team. Patrick Hare is actually going to be our program manager. Tom Jordan, which probably everyone knows, is going to be our solutions engineer. And then I also want you to, folks in the community especially, are probably going to want to get to know Tamara Dagnan. She's going to be our business analyst working on the data side of how we connect all these dots. So a little bit about how we got where we are. So many of you have seen this diagram, so I won't belabor it too much, but as you can see, it's a complicated mess. And really, what we're striving to do is simplify this. So as we enter into administrative transformation redesign effort, we have an interesting opportunity from the data source side of this to make sure we don't let some of these decisions get out in front of us. So as we transition our HR system and our ERP system, making sure that we have the proper infrastructure in place in front of that to be able to manage how we get access to systems, how services get provisioned, how systems consume and make decisions based on that data. So, again, a few interesting tidbits in here that I like to point out is just the data propagation that happens. Each and every one of these dots represents a decision that is actually being made based on campus data. So getting to a point where we can assert how people make decisions based on data without necessarily propagating that data and disseminating that data all over the university. And again, we've got a couple of these. I think I'm going to point out WISC lists that actually will push that data multiple different places. So that's actually making multiple hops. So what we've been doing up to date, many of you were involved with our discovery effort. So from November to February, we were really in our ideation phase, making sure that we really understood the problem, doing our best to come up with a holistic, rational solution. And then since March, we've actually been in what we've been referring to as phase 0. So making sure that we have good buy-in around what the initiative will entail, making sure we have funding, and making sure that staff are available. So beginning with July 1st, we actually start work, and I'll let Charlie and some of the other folks talk about what that will entail. Primary goal up on our initiative website is this: to empower the work of the university, including teaching, learning, and research. The Interoperability Transformation Initiative will establish improved interoperability infrastructure services and practices across campus. So in a nutshell, that's sort of what we're striving for. We've got within the initiative, we're really talking about the union of 3 specific elements: how we express and consume data, how we provide effective and sustainable services to accomplish integration, and then, of course, how we make sure people are authenticating and getting timely access to those services. So we've been toying around with a better way to describe scope. So that's actually been one of the challenging aspects of this initiative, is to really be able to have it hit home what we're actually talking about when we talk about interoperability. We're talking about a fairly broad space, but we really want to make it clear what we're not talking about, what we're not actually going to handle. So we are not going to be the owners and purveyors of all campus data, and we're definitely not going to be assuming ownership for all the various services around campus. You can sort of think of us as your municipality here in the middle. So this is not the perfect analogy. You've probably still got some work to do here, but really making sure the pipes are in place and that people have access to the services and systems that they need to be able to make those appropriate decisions about who has access to what and how we get data from here to there. So again, really making sure that we're differentiating, what will not be within our purview and what will. And again, out of scope, as Lois mentioned, we're not going to be converting all existing integrations at this point. We're really going to be focusing on making sure that we've got the proper infrastructure and systems in place in advance of the administrative process transformation effort. How that actually transforms, I think, still unclear, so there may be aspects of that we do need to deal with. So there are systems that will need to consume HR data, and how that transitions from PeopleSoft to whatever tool we ultimately end up using, to be determined. So there may be some flavor of integration, migration involved in that. But broadly speaking, transitioning all current integrations is not within scope. And then again, obviously, we are not responsible for campus BI and analytics, and we will not be managing data governance or campus master data. That strictly falls within the purview of the Office of Data Management. What we will be doing is making sure that we have processes, tools, engines in place to make sure people have effective mechanisms to handle service integration and have that be self-service when and where possible. Profile and login, basically that end-to-end user experience, I think is a unique element here. So having people to be able to assert some individual preferences and have the ability to have some purview into what data they're actually able to share and have potentially be able to release data to other systems and services. And then, of course, identity and access management, so some ability for people to be able to assert which services have access to which population. So again, that role catalog and that resource catalog, being able to say, have a full list of what roles should be connected to what systems. With that, I think I'm handing it over to Maria.
My name is Maria Damon, and I'm here with my colleague Laura Grady. We, along with our colleague Megan Holman at one of the tables here, are from the Center for Digital Accessibility and User Experience, and we are on the interoperability project. So one of the things we want to discuss today was service principles. These are the principles that we are aligning the interoperability project with. We're going to discuss what a service principle is and why use them, what are our principles, and how we'll put them into practice. So service principles are our standards for creating and maintaining an excellent service. They are a set of 12 criteria to help teams create and run very good digital services. And you can think of them as high-level best practices. So then why the muffins and the berries? If you try and make blueberry muffins without putting the blueberries into the batter, it becomes a mess. If you try and bake them in afterward, like stick them on top, it's messy and inelegant. Likewise, when we try to tack on things like security or interoperability or accessibility, we don't put the blueberries into the batter. These principles are helping to ensure that we are mindful and putting those blueberries into the batter. The principles will help us to create a vision to work towards. They're also embedding accessibility, security, and interoperability. As I mentioned, they'll help speed up implementation, and ultimately, they'll reduce risk. So at your table, you each have a list of the 12 principles. We're going to give you 2 minutes to look over them and see if there are ones that really excite you or that you feel might be a little bit controversial. We'll have a discussion in a couple of minutes. All right, any thoughts? Any ones that you're excited about? Any confusions? Yeah.
So 2 observations. It's very user-oriented, which I assume you mean end user, which is good, but it leaves out or does not acknowledge other use cases and requirements. So, service-to-service interoperability and requirements and other people's requirements are, number one is understand users and their needs to research, but what about understanding business processes and other requirements with an equal degree of thorough research? Mm-hmm. And it also stands out that you have, and I don't know quite what number 5 means, if that's a permanent leader or not, but you do highlight that the service under the decision-making authority, but you never identify any governance for the project.
So project governance, and then less focus, or more focus on users aside from end users. So more business intermediary?
All people who, and services that need to use the service.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. So these principles were inspired by the Service Standard of the United Kingdom and the Digital Services Playbook of the US government, and then we localized them to UW-Madison during our focused work effort in January. This feedback is really helpful, thank you, and we continue to evolve these service principles. Any other thoughts or things you're excited about or that you find surprising that are on the list? All right, we're going to move on to an activity.
All right, so you might be wondering how the interoperability teams are going to use these principles. Well, we want the team members to keep these close to them, post them on their desk or near their desk so that they are something that they can refer to. We also want the rest of the folks in the room to keep them handy as well because we want you to hold us accountable. We need to be following these principles and standards that we're setting forth, and so we want the campus community to let us know if we're missing the boat in some area. We'll be holding team meetings with each of the folks involved in the interoperability project to discuss the service principles in greater depth. We're going to be providing resources, so kind of a checklist approach to make sure that folks know exactly how to implement each of these. Then we're also going to do a periodic review internally with the teams to make sure that the principles are being adhered to and to listen to questions and concerns about those as well.
All right, so now we have a short activity. Behind the list of 12 principles, there's a page that has service principle number 2 and a discussion prompt. So if you'll allow me to read this aloud. A lot of our services solve part of a problem. These fragmented solutions can be expedient, but ultimately are difficult to use and to maintain. Instead, work across organizational boundaries to solve problems holistically. Start small and deliver values to users incrementally and frequently. So now we have a discussion prompt for you at your table. When have you experienced a fragmented service that solved part of a problem? And what was that like? After 5 minutes, we're going to bring it back to the front of the room. All right, thank you for your lively conversation. We're going to bring it back to the front of the room. What do you have for us? What were some examples of not solving a whole problem that were, and how you felt about them? Yes?
Deprovisioning. Some applications
Good one.
on campus have access to certain data feeds or events, whereas others have no idea they exist.
Deprovisioning, yeah, okay, thank you. And how does that make you feel? Yes, some nice looks back there. All right, what was another one? Yes?
We talked over here about the course guide and how parts of the original idea, and 2 of us at the table were actually involved in that 20 years ago. Parts of those original ideas were implemented, parts of them were set aside because they were enterprise solutions.
Okay, course guide, thank you. Other ones? Yes?
And you go to multiple places to get similar type of data.
Multiple places for similar types of data. All right. Did you have a particular type of data in mind that you were thinking?
Addresses.
Addresses? Yeah, that's a big pain point, I know. Anyone else? Yes?
So building on that, Jeff shared the example of the advising gateway that brought together, I think 18 to 20 sort of disparate tools that advisors were using to do their job. Then making the experience of sitting in a meeting with a student much more streamlined because it's all at your fingertips. So counters that.
Yeah, yeah. All right, great. So this is all interoperability discussion, right? So given that and what we just discussed, what is, along the lines of the advising gateway, a positive example? Like what would good interoperability look like? So if you could write on your note cards in the middle there, and I'll ask you to leave these when you leave. What does a successful interoperability initiative look like?
All right, thank you everyone for a great discussion today. We appreciate your feedback. Again, we'll collect the note cards at the end of the session today, so we appreciate all your feedback on that. Again, we want to hear from you. Please let us know what you think of these principles. We've got the email address up here, it/interop@list.wis.edu. Please send us your questions or any feedback that you might have. We also have the URL up on the screen. It's a long one, as you can see, so that you can see all the principles. So it's on the Interoperability Initiative site, /service-principles. You can also just perform a search on the IT website and get those as well. So again, thank you.
Hi folks, I'm Charlie Calderon. I'm an interim assistant director in application infrastructure services in Joe's group, specifically over the enterprise integration group. And I've been involved in the Interop initiative, I think, since November, so one of the originals. So this is one of my favorite pictures I think Tom introduced to us. I want to look back actually at the service principles sheet. And as we were looking at this, I kind of highlighted number 9 and number 6. So if you look at number 9, it says choose the right tools and technology, and I won't read the rest of it. And then number 6 is sort of the methodology that we want to apply with respect to taking on something very complicated and a multi-year initiative. Without applying number 6, I don't know how we make the right choices about technology, without iterating, without exploring, without learning. And that's really key to what we're trying to do here, is that methodology, the underpinning sort of philosophy of how we plan to deliver work. So what we're not trying to do, if I can find my laser pointer aspect. Yeah, there we go. We're not trying to tell you all the different things that we think we need to deliver over these next few years to make this initiative successful, because frankly we don't know. What we're trying to do is take a very complicated problem, take small bite-sized chunks of it, learn, iterate, get it wrong, go back to the drawing board, eventually get it right. And using that methodology, sort of this bottom approach here, we're hoping that we'll build something meaningful over time rather than something wrong and delivered at the end. So that's really fundamental to what we're doing. Similarly, and this is in particular for our dev team, applying DevOps philosophy. So continuous integration and continuous delivery of software, really supporting that methodology that I just described, delivering something regularly so that it can be in the hands of people, they can use it, they can test it, they can tell us what's great about it, they can tell us what we need to improve on. Automation also is sort of at the heart of DevOps, and so these are the things that we want to employ while we're trying to solve very complicated problems. All right, so we'll take a user-centric view of the world as a way to kind of put these things, some of the things that we've talked about since January, into context. Also, forgive my emoji game. It's not very good, but I hope it makes the point. So this is a person who is, say, participating in one of the UW's pre-college programs. The message that I'm going to kind of describe throughout these next few slides is how does a person's view change over time, and how do IT systems reflect that? So that's kind of what we're getting at. So as this person goes through this relationship with a pre-college program, now they've sort of begun a digital relationship with the university. But what happens next? Well, let's say the person goes on to apply and become an undergrad at UW, participating in all the different things our ecosystem might offer them. Obviously, we've got the educational component, you've got student orgs, maybe you've got sports, you've got connecting with prospective employers through things like Handshake, working with your advisors through applications that are made possible with data integrations like Starfish. Right, so also a very complicated ecosystem of things that our end users interact with, but still the same person who went through that pre-college program. So let's say they go on, they're now in the workforce, and the person wants to take a certification of sorts. Alan, maybe that's with you folks in DCS. Continuing education, other ways to interact with the university beyond, say, a traditional undergrad or that pre-college program. But again, the point being, same person at the middle, right? Person has a life event, decides that they're going to choose to go through a name change. That should still be, it's still the same person at the center, right? Even though the person has a different name, what you might see in our current state is now it's a different person in these various systems. We have different IT records reflecting the interactions that we've had with that person, but we want to improve on that. It's still the same person who's gone through these various activities, whose relationship with the university has changed over time. Let's say she goes on to become an employee, maybe a researcher or something like that. Again, now getting access to all sorts of different IT resources with different compliance regulations and whatnot, but the same human being at the center of it. And that entity, that person entity, needs to have a connection throughout all those IT systems, and interoperability seeks to make that happen. All the way through, say, an alumni donor, maybe a legacy fund contribution or something like that. It's the same person, right? All right, so I think many of you have probably seen this before. This is what we refer to as our low fidelity architecture diagram. It's still pretty low fidelity, but I think the point that we're trying to make here is how do we facilitate data movement, especially with that person-centric view of the world throughout the interoperability initiative. So we saw the spider web that Joe showed us as one of the drivers. Over here are source systems where data tends to flow from. How do we make that data more available without propagating it all throughout the university, without promoting point-to-point integrations, without pushing the complexity that is involved in doing all this integration out to all the consumers who need to either provide IT systems or as an end user use a system, et cetera. So we've talked about sort of business domain modeling, allowing IT to work more effectively with the business of the university and to understand and express interfaces to complexities within those domains without having to make everyone who's trying to integrate with that data also expert in those areas. We also want to create an integration platform, basically a central hub, a vehicle by which we can do these interfaces and make that understandable and expose the data models, expose the different APIs and events that you might subscribe to through a developer portal. Modernizing and improving our IAM platform to help express people's roles as they do go through that navigation through our ecosystem over time to represent one person, one entity throughout that flow. That includes a role catalog such that, as their roles change over time, that's expressed and updated automatically for consumers. And then an improved profile for end users to get access to their data, to manage their data, to express their preferences, to really interact with their digital identity, which then can be propagated out across the university. Tom, is there anything you would? Okay. So, again, please forgive my lack of artistic skills. This is a much simplified view of that spider web that we saw before. So let's kind of go through this. Let's see what this could look like in practice. This is kind of reflective of current state. I put your app here for those who can't see, but this is very loosely resembling something like the Course Search and Enroll app. So we've got some source systems over here. We've got HRS, we've got SIS, we've got the Person Hub in the middle, which has been the function of middleware for many years. We've got Chaos, the curricular web services. We've got NetID login, manifest, and IAM views for you to get access to identity data, all of these different point-to-point connections just to make the application possible. All right, so that's kind of current state. I've drawn in red some of the things that are going to change in the next slide. So with what we've basically characterized, we're hoping to implement some integration platform that exposes new things like perhaps a person API, which will make it easier and more modern for folks to get access to identity data. Also, we've kicked around the idea of exposing existing web services like Chaos through that integration platform and allowing a self-service mechanism by which developers on campus, the dev portal, can get access to these things, see that they're available, explore, really focusing on self-service. So what has changed in this picture is your app now has probably a series of connections through the integration platform that shifts the complexity away from these point-to-point integrations, away from the work that you're doing into IT to create new interfaces to express those business domains. So we're seeing fewer lines, perhaps less complexity, at least with respect to your app, and more of that complexity moving sort of behind the scenes, here. So just by show of hands, how many folks know that HRS and SFS are going to be replaced? It's most people. Awesome job, Nick and Ching-Su. So, how many of you are ready for that? Nick? That Ching-Su, of course. That you're not, John. That's about what we expected, right? So the idea here is that we should take on much more of that complexity so that you don't have to. Finally, just kind of finishing up with what that could look like, I've just sort of loosely put, and I'm sorry guys, I loosely put ATP here as a way to show that that's behind this sort of line of complexity, and your app doesn't necessarily have to deal as much with that type of that complexity. I also put on profile here, because as we were talking about data moving about the UW's ecosystem as a person changes their roles, they're going to express that through the profile. What should happen is that should propagate through our IT landscape without you having to worry about it. If someone wants to go and change their name, change their email address, change any of their preferences, you should just get that. And it should be expressed through the integrations that you have without having to know that these things are happening. Because that's not manageable, right? All right, Abriana.
Hi everyone, my name is Abriana Barca and I'm the Interim Assistant Director for the Identity and Access Management Team, formerly known as Middleware, if you're trying to kind of connect all these dots. And I have the pleasure of talking to you a little bit more about how we're actually going to conduct and get this work done, because there's a lot to it as you've heard today. And so we're taking this phased approach. So phase one, and we'll go into the details, is really just about learning and exploring. So it's actually trying to dig in and start some of these pieces. Phase two is about completing initial components and potentially moving things to RFP as needed, where phase three is about implementing that and enhancing our capabilities. Again, we can't start everything at once given the complexity of our current landscape. So phase one specifically will kick off, and actually has kicked off as of a couple of weeks ago. What we're doing though is we're taking two agile teams and having them work on some real world scenarios. This includes looking at specifically the developer portal. So we have a team that's actually kicked off and started looking at what this will look like and getting us ready to continue to iterate. And a team that's looking at preferred name and pronoun. We've talked about that as an ongoing challenge for us here at the university. And so trying to figure out some ways how we might express that in the future. Again, the goal with these teams, though, is to really iterate, to start taking some chunks of this and to better understand what the future might look like. It's helping prepare us for what RFPs or what we will need and what infrastructure we can keep and continue to use. Again, it's about learning. So what works, what doesn't. Phase two is, of course, next, and it will kick off in October, so just on the heels of phase one, and will continue through the end of the fiscal year, so through June. From there, again, the focus is completing those initial components where it's appropriate, so depending on kind of where we're at, but specifically the HR business domain modeling, and then initiating those RFPs as needed. And the goal with phase two, kind of the main component, is to deploy at least a start of an integration platform. So again, to the earlier points about agile, so we can get people using it, get feedback, and improve it even further. Phase three will kick off then in July 2020 and continue for the next 2 years. It's our biggest phase, and obviously being the furthest out, sort of the most vague in the sense of kind of what specifically and how we'll further break that down as we get closer to it. But we do know that, again, we'll be doing implementation from those RFPs. We'll be building our our integration experience so that you can do self-service to the most extent possible. We'll be deploying profile and login process, which is, again, a key component of what we're trying to do with this project. And then starting to look at what sunsetting looks like for our old infrastructure, and then looking at what comes beyond that in terms of a plan. As Lois said, the actual transition is out of scope for this, but obviously as we start to stand up new infrastructure, we'll want to know what comes next. A huge part of this being successful, though, will be engagement in an ongoing capacity. So this is definitely a work in process, and I'd say will be a work in progress throughout the entire duration of this project. As we move through these phases, different ones of you will need to be more engaged, depending on kind of where we're at. We're looking at, though, key projects and initiatives. So I know we've been meeting regularly with ATP, and we'll look to other projects and groups to figure out kind of what our touch points are and how we work together. We'll also be looking at specific departments and units. So we've been meeting with the Office of Data Management and other groups to kind of better understand this space. And then, of course, as we go through specific subject matter experts, technical partners, and end users as we get closer to functionality and as it's appropriate. But really, we want to make sure we're solving the right problem. That's a big part of what we're doing and why we're here today and why we'll continue to convene as a group throughout campus to figure out what are the right problems and how do we make sure we're actually solving for them. And since we have a captive audience here today, we do want to know how you at least will want to be engaged. So we've created a short link here. It's, if you don't mind, either grabbing a cell phone. I see a lot of you with computers. If you don't have a device handy or would prefer, there's also surveys in the middle of the table. There's about 5 per table. We can certainly pass out extras though. And we're really looking to understand, how do you want to be engaged? How can we build a plan that really incorporates your unique needs? There's only 3 questions. It's your name, how you want to be engaged, and then specifically if you've got recommendations for who else we should be engaging with. We know this is a university undertaking and want to make sure we're spreading to the widest extent possible within reason. So I'll give you just a minute or 2 to go to this link. It's go.wis.edu/B53N03. I'll leave that up just for a moment. And again, we have paper copies if you'd prefer, and you can leave those on the table.
All right, I'll call us back. So quickly, before we open it up for questions, I just want to remind everyone that we do have an initiatives page out there on it.wisc. It is my hope that we can be exceedingly transparent with this project. I'm going to preemptively thank Mary and Marcus. You know, again, we want to make sure that we're active with engagement for this initiative. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions. I guess that's it then. Thank you.